The new frontier, a digital age as it is known, is becoming more apparent with each passing day. With new technologies being invented every day, the idea we can pay for something as trivial as groceries or as extravagant as a new car, all by the touch of a fingerprint, is, for a lot of people, the doorway to new opportunities and advancement. However, for others, it creates disadvantages. Not just for those who lack the cognitive understanding to be able to keep up with modern day technology, but for those who dare to question those in authority. Such advancement only serves to aid the separation between the wealthy and the poor to become fixed in place. Those that deviate from the law in any way will be ostracized, regardless if that is because you're breaking the most severe laws or simply protesting something you disagree with. If I had it my way, of course, we'd still be using pound, shilling and pence here in Britain, and therefore everything and everyone would be on a sort of level playing field, more or less. Sadly, this is never to happen. So with such trust being placed in our banking infrastructure, the law of the land in terms of a bank's good practice procedures should adapt in order to keep up with a changing society and economy. Sadly, however, it seems banks these days have other ideas of how to operate. And what I'm going to explain to you today is what the situation is here in Britain. I don't know about the rest of the world, but specifically here in Britain, and also to state why such operation for you is deeply worrying. It all began on the 29th of June of this year. Nigel Farage, a prominent politician in these parts, revealed some startling information to the public about his own personal finances.
I have been with the same banking group since 1980. I've had my personal accounts with them since that date, and my business accounts right through the 1990s when I worked in the City of London and in recent years too. I got a phone call a couple of months ago to say, we are closing your accounts. I asked why. No reason was given. I was told a letter would come which would explain everything. The letter came through and simply said, we are closing your accounts. We want to finish it all by a date which is around about now.
In this tweet, Nigel explains that the explanation for the closure of his business account was due to a commercial decision. Aside from the obvious vague nature of such a comment, my only question at this point was, what on earth do they mean by commercial? I mean, for a moment I thought they were referring to a TV advertisement Nigel might have been part of, but then it dawned on me. The word was broad to cover all matters, as by its definition. You can see it here. The definition of such a word covers a advertisement and concerned with or engage in commerce. So the explanation for this became slightly obvious to me. Nigel was a GB News correspondent. He was also a former UKIP leader. He was a former Reform UK leader. Thus, NatWest must have closed his account due to something he said, therefore disagreeing with him personally on his own personal opinion. However, speculation aside, it wasn't long before the mainstream media came attacking as they usually do. On the 30th of June till the 4th of July, article after article, news report after news report kept disseminating down to the masses, telling us all that Nigel Farage is claiming this and that he's claiming that. The word claims kept reoccurring as to say, well, he says this, but don't listen to this guy, he has no evidence. Well, the mainstream media was about to get the shock of a lifetime. Despite having articles as well as texts and tweets of support from other people, not only in support of what he said, but also so they could voice their own personal experiences, either with their own personal finances or someone that they knew had suffered in the same way. It wasn't until the 4th of July the media decided they had the narrative they wanted. Tweets by a man called Simon Jack detailed how Farage's account supposedly fell below the financial threshold for him to have a business account with NatWest's subsidiary, Courts. Now, you may be asking why I've taken the attitude that I have, that this is somehow some sort of mainstream collusion. Well, because of this.
On the 3rd of July, you were having dinner, sitting next to the BBC's economics correspondent, Simon Jack. And a funny thing happened, you know. At 10 o'clock the next morning, Simon Jack rang me. And he told me that the reason my account had been cancelled is that I didn't have enough money in the account. And that anyway, what was the problem? Because I'd been offered NatWest accounts. The BBC put that out, and many in the media accepted that version. Mr. Jack, for some reason, seems to have gone to ground today and hasn't backtracked from it. Can I ask you, Dame Alison, was it you that breached my private client banking confidentiality? Was it you that told Captain Jack that?
If anyone's going to dare to say to me that this dinner was a coincidence, I would kindly like to invite you to find the nearest oven and insert yourself into it, because clearly you're either very deluded or just a plain liar. As the month continued on, Farage kept bringing up details of this situation on his weekly news segment. Newspapers were publishing articles, and other individuals kept stating the same thing, that their accounts were closed for unspecified reasoning. Hell, even MPs were getting involved.
Last week, Nigel Farage publicised the cancellation of his bank account under the politically exposed persons regulation. But he is only the latest of a number of people to have their lives wrecked by this regulation. Recently, Lords in the other place have tried to correct this policy with only partial success, I understand, because of pushback from the Home Office and the security services. Can the Home Secretary explain why this is and what she's going to do about it?
But as Farage kept keeping up with his defence of free speech in regard to our banking industry, two things occurred. One being more prominent people started talking about their accounts, and secondly, articles began to change. They changed more in favour of Farage, clearly demonstrating that not only was he right, but they were also wrong, and they needed to change positions and change fast. Now, this would never have happened if mounting pressure wasn't coming from all aspects of society. But if you look closely at these articles, they don't really credit Farage. Instead, they word their articles to make it seem they have just put these stories together out of nowhere. They've done it all on their own accord. Just check out this wording. This one's from Sky News. It starts off as you might imagine for an article that was more in line with what Farage was now saying, detailing that banks may be wrongly closing customers' accounts or silently marking them for fraud concerns, a consumer group has warned. But then it goes on to saying, quote, it comes after former UKIP leader Nigel Farage, in a separate issue, sparked a row by claiming that his bank account with courts has been closed due to him being a politically exposed person. In a separate issue. It's not a separate issue. In fact, they are directly linked. The truth is, media like Sky News want to try and make it separate, so that they can isolate the issue away from Farage blowing the whistle, and simply make it about themselves, to make it seem that their jobs, the thing that they're meant to be, journalists, is still relevant and exists. Writing such articles at a time when more and more high-profile politicians were coming out in support of what Nigel was saying, one of which in particular might show the true reason why Farage's account was closed.
Does my right honourable friend share my unease that a bank that has the government as its largest shareholder should close the account of a senior opposition politician? Will he use the government's shareholding to ensure that there is an inquiry into these circumstances, because the subject data access request makes it clear, or certainly indicates, that it is the person concerned's political views that led to his cancellation? And does my right honourable friend agree with me that however much we may find them tiresome, members of the opposition deserve bank accounts?
The government is NatWest's largest shareholder. This demonstrates a direct attack on anyone with opposing views. It doesn't matter if Farage is a public figure. As we've seen, ordinary people are too being targeted for wrongthink. What the government didn't realise is that they would be found out and that Farage would go public with his knowledge. But this is not the end of it. On the same day this question occurs, this also happened.
This evening we got a Treasury statement. The government has stepped in to address fears that banks are terminating accounts because they disagree with someone's political beliefs. Banks will now be required to give people at least 90 days notice before closing an account, and crucially, they'll be required to spell out why they are terminating bank accounts. And the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, who I have to say has been enormously helpful over the last few days, he says simply, and he's right, freedom of speech is a cornerstone of our democracy and it must be respected by all institutions. Well, hear, hear to that. as indeed Elon Musk himself said on Twitter last night.
The government's implementation of new policies is supposedly safeguarding free speech. How wonderful of them, right? Not only that, a day later, NatWest CEO apologises to him. Now, if I were a cynical man, which of course, you know I'm not, I would say that this situation screams of damage control. The point is this, as is the point with most of the content I do on this channel, the government and its institutions, no matter where you are in the world, it doesn't matter, they are not your friend. To believe that they are is either deeply naive on your part, or perhaps smacks of some hidden Marxist desires you may have. Mainstream media hates you. Politicians don't care about you. You must use your own wit and knowledge to make educated decisions, not rely on the supposed facts or the science as many did for years. Before I end this video, it should be noted that it wasn't until the 24th of July that Simon Jack and the BBC issued both a retraction and an apology for what they said about Farage's accounts. And it should be noted that not up until the 0 hour of that day did they actually apologise. In fact, they categorically refused to apologise until that moment. Clearly, pressure had mounted down from up on high. If this doesn't show mainstream tax-funded media for what it is, I don't think much will for you. My message is quite simple in this video. Protect your investments, protect your livelihood and your family, be skeptical, always be skeptical, and most of all, be opinionated. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.